On the latest episode of A Widow's Heart, a 30-foot wave of mud and debris crashed down on Kim Cantin's home in 2018, and life changed in an instant. She lost her husband and son while Kim and her daughter survived. Hear Kim's inspiring story based on her book, Where Yellow Flowers Bloom.
The title, I think, is a metaphor for life, right? We saw beauty where there should be none. I have a very different life than I had before, but you look for the beauty where there should be none.
Well, welcome to another episode of A Widow's Heart. I'm Pam Lundell, and I lost my husband, John, a long time ago. But because of that, I have learned to walk alongside widows, and it's kind of my thing. It's kind of my ministry. So I'm glad that you are all here, and I want to introduce you to my latest guest. Her name is Kim Cantin, who is going to share a story that is absolutely unbelievable, but you lived through it. You're on the other side. And you can tell us about lessons learned. The book, Where Yellow Flowers Bloom, it's a true story of hope through unimaginable loss. Kim, welcome. Welcome to A Widow's Heart.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So a little bit about me is a little over 5 years ago, I became a widow. I became not only a widow, but a shining light parent because my husband and my son were killed in a natural disaster called the Montecito debris flow and mudslide. And so what happened was in the middle of the night, there was some heavy rain. And prior to that night, a month prior, there'd been the largest wildfire in California history called the Thomas Fire. And it took out all the vegetation on the hillside. And it left big boulders the size of VW bugs on the hillside, just kind of there precariously. So when I saw the houses that were up on the hill, you just felt sad for them. We were down in the village, so we didn't feel as sad for us because we were further away. But heavy rain came that first week of January, and we had all our warning cell phone alerts on and watched the news and watched the computers, and we weren't in a mandatory evacuation zones. But regardless, in the middle of the night, heavy rain came. It was, I think, about half an inch in 15 minutes. But it came to a mountain that had no foliage to hold everything in place. So part of the mountain came crashing down, and our home was the epicenter. A 30-foot wave kind of plumed up, and it had massive boulders the size of cars, 100-year-old down trees, and it crashed down, obliterating our family home with my family in it. And
this is Montecito, California. So gorgeous. Oh my goodness.
Where Harry and Meghan are, all that stuff. Oprah, everyone.
The way you write, I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful in this book. And that is the mudslide after the fire, right?
Yes, mudslide after the fire. So my husband, he washed away and was found about 1.5 miles away at the beach. He wasn't in the house when the house was, I think he saw it coming when he opened the front door, and he says, "Get out now." And he ran past me in the living room, and my hand got stuck in the door. He was trying to get me out. The kids were in their rooms trying to get their clothes on because we were trying to evacuate with the heavy rain. And my daughter was whisked away 1 football field away, and she was buried alive under 20 feet of mud. A couple cars, part of her roof, for 6 hours, and she only had a tiny pocket of air in front of her mouth to breathe until her rescue.
How old was she?
Lauren was 14 at the time, and her rescue was shown all around the world because it was miraculous to see this young lady get out of that entombment after 6 hours. It took them 2 hours to get her out, so 8 hours, and kind of walk with the help of the firemen and such to the ambulance. And I was washed away 2 football fields away, and I was found wrapped in electrical wire in the intersection in Montecito in an intersection. And I was severely injured in the hospital. 3 weeks, had to learn to walk again, multiple surgeries. So nothing I'd recommend for anyone. And so I became, my house washed away. I had nothing, like no passport, no birth certificate, no family pictures, no plates, no couch, nothing. And I was injured, and my daughter, had her experience, and my husband and my 17-year-old son, and my dog were killed. And my son, the 23 people died that night, and 2 of them were missing. They couldn't recover their remains, and my son was one of them. And so then once I got healed a bit, I went to do the search, and I had, engaged in searching, looking for him. And in May of 2021, we found some of the university team found some of the remains.
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine what it would be like. I mean, each story from each widow or widower that we've talked to is so personal, and so extraordinary, but yours in an instant, your life was so drastically changed. How did your mind, your body comprehend this in the first moments?
Well, Pam, I was in shock, right? And I was severely injured, and they gave me the painkillers because I was as if someone, I was eggplant purple, and as if someone took a wire brush to my front and back of my body. So I was, they medicated me and prepared me for surgery. So the early phases were just stunned shock and just a profound emptiness, oh my God. Yeah. But then I had to pivot. I had to put on my executive function hat to stabilize for my daughter. How do I stand up as mom and make sure she's scared to death? She only has one surviving parent, and that surviving parent's in the hospital who can't walk. So I pivoted. I kind of put aside the desperate grief for my husband and just numbness with the loss of my son to stabilize for her. And so a lot of my grief and everything was delayed. It took me about 5 years to get through it all, which is longer than the average bear. But it's because I had to rebuild a life, and I had so much to do.
We're talking with Kim Cantin. She is the author of a book about this experience, Where Yellow Flowers Bloom, a true story of hope through unimaginable loss. So many questions for you. When your daughter, Lauren, what was it like for you to see her for the first time after the tragedy?
It was wonderful. It was gratefulness, right? I'm just where I felt it the most actually is not even when I saw her for the first time. It's when I was in the emergency room. I got in there at 8:30 in the morning, and they were putting lidocaine on me to numb me all out on my body. And I heard the door swing open, and it was a nurse, and she said, "Do you have a daughter named Lauren?" And this was at 10:30. I'd been there 2 hours. And I said, "Yes." And they said they just rescued her. That was the moment that my whole shoulders just relaxed, thank God, because it was Armageddon that I lived through, and I didn't know where my family was. So to hear that she's just been rescued was monumental. It was more monumental than when I saw her, because I just knew she was safe.
Your writing about her rescue, as you mentioned, it was shared all around the world during that tragedy with the mudslide in 2018, right? It was January?
Yes, January 9 of 2018.
Of 2018. And the way you write about it in this book is it's like you are right there. And can you describe? She was literally upside down. I think the phrase was she was staring at her feet. She was bent.
Yeah. So, why I wrote the book, it's actually a book about hope, right? But so many people, we were the poster family of the mudslide, even though 23 people died. They found our Christmas card. It happened to go all over the news, right? Whatever. Lauren's rescued. And so I knew people had a lot of questions of really what it was like and what happened. And so, her rescuer, her paramedic rescuer or firefighter, Andy, he tells in the book, the firsthand experience of when he first met her, which is when she was fighting for her life. Then I had Lauren write her firsthand experience. What was it like being buried alive for the 6 hours? And she was conscious. So she was in a starfish position, with her kind of contorted, bended over down, her neck kind of tilted, a little pocket of air. She could move her fingers slightly. But she would try to push on the walls of her entombment, and it wouldn't budge. Or if she heard people, she'd scream, but there's 20 feet of mud. And so it was muffled, right?
Yeah.
So you hear her firsthand experience, which is jaw dropping, and what went through her mind to keep her sane and what she did to keep herself sane is amazing. And then I wrote about my experience, what I remember as the mud came roaring in. And I took my last breath and it was mud, not air. And I thought, I'm done at that point.
Oh my gosh. It's a story of hope after just an unimaginable loss. I'm trying to say it, unimaginable loss.
Yeah.
But can you tell me where Yellow Flowers Bloom, where did that come from?
Pam, that's a great question. And I credit my fabulous daughter with that, because we were talking about titles and, we had employed a lot of science into the search, canine search dogs. We had a university anthropology team at a top 10 research university help. And where we ended up finding the bones, were on this pile. And this pile was soil that had arsenic in it. It had all the stuff from 62 homes that were destroyed. So think about people's paint thinner in their garage, their oils, their insulation, right? Nothing should grow in this toxic soup soil. And where we found the remains was covered with beautiful yellow wildflowers.
Oh, I have chills.
It was stunning. It was stunning. And so one of the students, the university student, clipped some and she brought them to my house in a vase. And she said, life found a way, because we'd been looking for 3 years, right? Over 30 square miles for our needle in the haystack. And I said, love found a way. The love of angels were helping me find him. I think Dave and Jack were helping me find him. All the compassionate people who came out to find. There was 30 square miles and we found our needle in a haystack. So and where Yellow Flowers Bloom, the title, I think, is a metaphor for life, right? We saw beauty where there should be none. And my life imploded, right? I have a very different life than I had before. But you look for the beauty where there should be none, because that's how you move on and thrive, right? Look for the beauty, because there is beauty places.
I work with I was many years ago, privileged to help launch a nonprofit for widows called Widows Might, MIGHT. And
great.
we have 4 cornerstones: to live, to heal, to grow, and to thrive. And I think you may be in the thriving space right now. The to live is just to get through moment to moment. Where's that breath going to come from for the next 5 minutes? What are these people doing in my house? Oh my goodness. Your husband, Dave, now they recovered him fairly immediately.
Then the next day.
Yeah. Oh, and then it was your son. When and how did you decide to have a service for your husband and your son?
So, I was in the hospital and needed to know I could walk with a walker, right, before we could do the service. So his service was in February. I think it was the weekend of Super Bowl Sunday, the Saturday of, right? So, and his death happened January 9th. So it was a month's difference, but I had to be able to be there. So we did that. And then we didn't want to do a joint one, because we thought we could find Jack could be recovered any week. And I kind of wanted his own. So, we waited. And so Jack's memorial service, we didn't have his remains yet, was, St. Patty's Day of 2018. Those at the Santa Barbara Mission, which is just a spectacular, beautiful venue. And, so we had them about a month apart, a little over a month apart.
Can you tell me what you want people to know about your husband and your son? You learn about them in your book. It's so wonderful.
You learn about them. You know what? Dave was the guy who walked through the door. How we doing? And he really loved people. He had this big charismatic smile. He had a very kind heart. He was a scoutmaster. He had a big executive job in medical device. So he was about people. His job was about people, sales and marketing. My son was a scout, so we wanted to have more time with him. And the mom said, would Dave please be the scoutmaster? So he said, sure, I'll do it. And even if it meant coming back from Europe and not getting rest and then taking the troop out on a hike, right? He gave more than he got. And he was kind. And then Jack was an old soul. I think he was just an old soul and empathetic, and people connected with his soul. And he started, he knew he was blessed with resources. And so he used his resources for good. He started a community service group, co-founded it with 2 other boys called Teens on the Scene, which does service work in the area. And there's 5 high schools that have the group now. And he was an Eagle Scout. And so he refurbished the playground of an underfunded school where most of the kids live under the poverty level. He redid all their backboards for basketball and painted them cobalt blue and with dolphin stencil on them. And so Jack, 17, I think, lived more in his 17 years than many in their life of what he gave back. Gave back to this.
I think he got his Eagle Scout designation like way early too, didn't he?
And yeah, he got it in ninth grade. We told him, my husband said, get your Eagle Scout. You have to get it before your 18th birthday. But my husband said, get it when you're 15 before the fumes play a part. And he goes, what's the fumes? The car fumes and the perfumes, right? Before he's distracted. And that was really sage.
I read that. Yeah.
That was sage advice, right?
Oh. And how do you remember them today?
Oh, Dave, I remember with a warm, vibrant smile, kind. And, I think you marry people. Well, for me, I married someone to heal me. And, from my family background and the dynamics in that family which wasn't terribly bad, but it wasn't terribly good. And, he healed me with unconditional love. Oh. And, so I married the person who helped heal my soul, in feeling unconditional love. And my son just touched my soul. I always felt soul connected to him, and he taught me a lot. He just taught me a lot about empathy and kindness and turn the other cheek. Dave was always a turn the other cheek. When people maybe did something mean to him at work, he could just turn the other cheek, and I would kind of like go, really, you're not that upset? And he could kind of turn the other cheek. And Jack did that. And Jack, I remember at 4, he was a special needs boy, and Jack was probably 5, and so there was 4 or 5. And he just sat on the ground holding his hand, and then he'd walk him on the bus and sit with him on the bus. And there was just a knowing to be kind to people who, may have been born with some challenges that other people don't have.
Oh, that's really incredible. And then how did you decide to write this incredible book? How long did it take?
I did it with COVID. COVID actually set the stage for, I'm in your house, not doing much, and it was just Lauren and I, and you had more time on your hands. And I was worried I'd forget some of the details of the event, and I wanted them for my future family. So I said, I'd better just get them down. And then I started writing, and it was a reflective process. I'm like, you know what? I'm seeing myself in desperate grief at the beginning. And then I see how I've shifted as the time went along that I'm writing about, of more peaceful integration of my new life, or peaceful adaptation. It's not moving on. You'll never move, you move forward, right?
Right.
And it's about integrating, about letting it be alongside you, but still thrives. And so then when I wrote that, I said, you know what? I think this might help other people. And I've really gotten that feedback. People who read the book, some of them say, I really needed to read that. Because it is more hopeful and inspirational. I was the poster child for really bad things happening all at once, right? Lost my husband, lost my son, lost my dog, lost my husband. It's unbelievable.
And your dog. I'm a huge Chester. Dog person. What a beautiful dog you had.
He was Chester. An Irish setter. He was my, like, out of all the dogs I've had in my life, he was the one. He was the one. And, so that was tough.
And I love the part too, where you had some premonition in December of 2017. You had family pictures and even a photo shoot with your dog. I
did. I think there was an internal knowing that was calling me to get some things done. And thank God I did. I got family photos done weeks before the tragedy, and actually in the place we ended up looking for Jack's remains. Of family, the pictures of Chester. And I write about some of these really, when you reflect back at them, I call them whispers, like things that maybe our souls know, but we don't know at the conscious level why we're doing it.
Right.
But maybe our soul was preparing us for this event that was coming. So do this because of it. And upon reflection, it was pretty jaw-dropping to me. Like, oh, wow.
Were you able to salvage some of those specific photos?
I called the photographers, and they had them.
Oh,
and
of
so
course.
Right. So Medania got me them. And then the lady who did the ones of Chester gave me those. So, I was able to get, I got married in 99 and they used film then, not all the digital. And I called the photographer and he had this film still in storage and he pulled out my wedding pictures and we remade my wedding album, which, when you lose everything, there are some things that you want. And that's the memories that I want to have.
Kim Cantin, what an unbelievable story and a true story of hope through unimaginable loss, like her book says, where yellow flowers bloom. More with Kim in just a moment. Want to thank Wings for Widows for sponsoring the podcast, A Widow's Heart. They say life changes and we change lives. Wings for Widows provides free professional coaching and education to help widowed men and women navigate the financial trauma experienced in widowhood. They provide comprehensive advice, guidance, and encouragement when it's most needed. The results are life-changing. In fact, Brenda from Lakewood Ranch, Florida, said, after my husband of 40 years passed, with the intense pain and grief, I was completely overwhelmed by all the practical things that needed to be taken care of. I had no idea how to deal with all the financial and administrative affairs. Alan from Wings for Widows was my angel, a gift from God at the most painful and traumatic time of my life. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Wings for Widows, for taking such good care of me. If you'd like to learn more, it's free financial help from Christian financial experts. Go to wingsforwidows.org. That's wingsforwidows.org. Now more with my guest, Kim Cantin, that's Cantin, author of Where Yellow Flowers Bloom, her story of hope through unimaginable loss. Can you tell me, now that you are about 5 years out, what are some memorable things that people did to help you through day by day in those early weeks, months, a story that might stand out?
Well, people were my anecdote for sure. What was really, there was certain things that just touched my heart because I lost everything, right? I'm in the hospital and they cut off the clothes I was wearing. So I own not even a pair of underwear. I didn't own a bra. And I had some of my friends, some of the moms on the Teens on the Scene group that co-founded that service group, my son and their boys. They went to a local store in town that happens to be a chain. And they said, does Kim Cantin shop here? And they looked it up. They said, yes. And they said, can we just rebuy everything she bought last year? Because they needed to know the size and the style. And then they went and brought me a bra. That must have been a daunting task. How do you find someone you don't, how do you pick the right size, right?
Something you never thought you'd be doing for your friend.
No, and it wasn't really the right size, but hey, it did the job, and buying me underwear. It was like such the,
I can't imagine.
Intimate level of thoughtfulness of what I needed, just to have some things. And that really touched me that they thought to do that, or they, my friend Melinda bought me a purse, and then, I had someone from my high school. She lives in, she's in Philadelphia now. All her neighbors wanted to pray for me and my family because Jack was missing and pray for him. And she just her neighbors got together and did a big Tupperware bin of just simple things I might need in my house. Like, those Tupperware little storage containers that you need in your kitchen for leftover food, soaps, just stuff that we all have in our house, but I had none of that. So those are the warmth things that happened.
I love that. I remember my husband passed away on August 14th. And the next month I got a really beautiful note from a friend of mine. And then a while later, I got another note. And in each one, she was remembering John because we were all, couple friends and things like that. And then when I kind of came out of the fog, I was like, wait a minute, this is like on the date that John passed away. So every month for a year, she sent me a little note or a card or a coffee gift card with a note along with it. And I thought that was so special.
There's a lady, a lady in town, and her son was friends with mine. And she'll sneak by and drop off an orchid, to the front of the house or some flowers. She'll just do it. And so there's there's been people who've just dropped off things at my house and I don't know who it's from. And they're just like flowers and bouquets. And there's just this, because the community knows who I am, right? I was all over the news. And there's just been so much kindness.
Yeah, the name of the book, again, highly recommended, Where Yellow Flowers Bloom by Kim Cantin. That's Cantin. How is Lauren doing today?
She's doing well. She's a student at university right now, and she's in summer school, so she's doing well.
Good. Where are you living now?
In Santa Barbara. I
Okay.
still own the property in Montecito, but we live probably 7 minutes away from there, so we're still in Santa Barbara.
What advice do you have for maybe friends and family who are listening? Because we have a lot of listeners who have a family member who is a widow. And what would you suggest for them to help out the newly widowed?
A couple of things I would say is be open to all the resources that you may need. Like this filleted me open, and I didn't know what I needed, but I knew I needed some trauma therapy. I needed some grief therapy. I needed massage, right? You're not getting much touch anymore in your life. And I needed just to feel touch. I was just open, be really open to what you need. Use people as your anecdote. There's going to be people who show up that come in for a reason or a season, and they're probably there for a reason. So I would say that there's also, I got introduced to a person, Jennifer Levin, and she has a website called www.therapyheals. And she's an expert in sudden traumatic death. And she's also an expert in thantology, which is death and bereavement. And so she helps people, if their spouse dies of cancer or whatever, or a sudden event. And she has a free podcast series
what's
called
that?
Jennifer. It's under www.therapyheals. And it's Jennifer's podcast, and she'll bring in experts or she'll interview people. So she interviewed me in a 2-part series because I was a natural disaster. She has people who've lost people, maybe a spouse from suicide, maybe from COVID. She'll bring in experts about what you need with how children handle the loss and what things to think about in their journey. So these are like 30 to 45-minute vignettes. They're free. And I didn't know about them until this year, but once I found out about them, like, where were you 5 years ago? Like, these are really helpful and they're very good. And she's such an expert. Like she's a PhD in this stuff. She's not, I'm dabbling in counseling and I'm,
right
at this level. She's PhD, fellow with anthology. She speaks on this topic. She trains people on grief and bereavement. And I would say go and listen to these podcasts. Save yourself 30 minutes and just, www.therapyheals. She does grief retreats, and she does grief retreats, interestingly enough, for people who are further in their grief, not the immediacy of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to go to one actually in August, but something came up. And so I'm not, but I'm 5 years out and I was going to go. It's just another way of saying, where are you now? And how will you continue to honor your loved one and walk alongside how you thrive? So I would say that use people, use all the resources, and Jennifer's podcast, I think, might be really beneficial for people.
It's so awesome. What I love about doing these podcasts with someone like you who's been through so much trauma and horror, but as you said, it is a hope-filled story, because what's the other option? I mean, just to never come out of it.
I think what it is our loved ones would be so sad if we were laying in the fetal position, not living our lives, and just wallowing in the loss. I think our loved ones are in pure joy, and they want us to thrive. They want us to go on and live a vibrant life. And so the best way I can honor my husband and the best way I can honor my son is to do that.
Absolutely. Okay. I just have to ask you, I'm going to get there and I'm going to read it. Chapter 31, Anthropology and Liposuction. Can you give me a little bit of that?
Yeah. So in the book, man, it's like reading a diary, right? I lay it all out.
I know.
There.
You're such a great writer.
And I was, I had a pretty big job in corporate America. So I was more corporate Kim, and I tell it all in this book. But yeah, we were doing our search. These search dogs were going to come out, the same search dogs who'd looked for Amelia Earhart in the South Pacific recently for her remains. They're of older remains, more the bone, not the flesh. And we went to an expert in Texas, and I said, how do I best prepare the soil and prepare for these dogs to be successful sniffing? And he said, well, you have to test the dogs. So you want to get like a maybe a 1 to 5 year old human bone, and maybe bury it and test the dogs if they can smell it, just to see if they're working. And I said, if I had a 1 to 5-year-old human bone, I'd be arrested, right? I said, that's not,
let me just get one of those.
right. Like that's not what you're supposed to do. And so I said, what's my other choice? He said, well, can you get some liposuction? Can you get some human fat? Because that will help too. And so I called, I used to be in medical device. So I just called a doctor. I said, hey, when you do a liposuction, can you sport me, a cup of fat? And he goes, no, that's an ethical violation, biohazard ethical violation. And I'm like, gotcha. I didn't know, gotcha. I was just doing what I saw. And then I called another one. I'm like, there's got to be a legitimate way to do this. Right. And so I called another one. I told my situation. It was, someone who knew of the story. And he said, could you come in on Friday? And I'm thinking, oh, he's going to give me some lipo, right? And he goes, no, he goes, do you think you have fat? He goes, I'm going to pop you on the table. I'm going to put some lidocaine in your belly by your belly button. And I'm just going to get you some lipo that you can take with you. And I'm like, oh, okay.
So you got liposuction.
I hopped on a table on a Friday afternoon. They didn't do the typical anesthesia. And so it hurt like the dickens. And my hands were sweating. And, normally I'd say, hey, have at it. Like do as much as you can, right? Like while you're there, just go for it in my stomach. But it was so painful. As soon as he got the amount he needed, which was, I think, half a cup, I'm like, stop. And then I came home with just bandages all over my stomach. And my daughter, and I said, Warren, don't go in the fridge. Don't go in the laundry room fridge. I go, stay out of there a while. And she goes, why? And I go, well, and, she looked at my belly. She's like, gross. She thought I was off my rocker, but you know what? We tested the dogs. It worked brilliantly and they found areas for which to search. And so, as any parent would do, you do anything for your kid, even liposuction.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It is the most fantastical, hilarious, love-filled story I've ever heard that a mom would do because you were searching for your son.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to cry.
Yeah. So that's the liposuction story.
And I noticed, and then also you talk about kintsugi, which is, something that I've become very familiar with. It's the Japanese art of taking something that's so precious, that's broken, and putting it back together with liquid gold, really, and making it stronger and more beautiful than it was before. And what a, incredible, comparison to what you've been through, what I've been through, what people who lose their spouses go through.
Yeah.
Yours in a much different way than many.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. It really, my friend actually, right after it happened, I called her, we had worked together, and she told me the metaphor of kintsugi. And she goes, you're going to crumple and reassemble and you're going to be more beautiful from it. And that gave me just an interesting context. I didn't really understand what she's talking about. And then what happened, interestingly enough, and you'll see in the book, is we had this wooden pig, shabby, cute little pig. It was about, a foot and a half by a foot.
Like a decoration kind of a thing?
A decoration. It was in my daughter's room. And someone found it in the mudslide, in the flow. But it was broken. The ear was off. The tail was off. The hoof was off. And so without me knowing, they gave it to an artist who repaired it in kintsugi. And so I have it. And it's and this little piggy is much more beautiful than it ever was. And so it sits in my office right now. And it just reminds me of that it's art of the precious scars, right? Our precious scars tell our story, our human story. We all have a human story. Don't hide the scars. It's part of us.
Yes. And sharing stories is what I found out in the early years of being in radio. Just months after my husband passed away, strangers, but they were widows, would call and say, if you can get up in the morning and go to work, I can do it. And then we started having coffees and dinners together. And it was kind of the beginning of this nonprofit for widows. But there's just something, it's like a sacred sisterhood. No one wants to be in, obviously, everyone says that. But there are things that we can share with each other that we just can't with anybody else.
Yeah, there's a depth there. I had a friend of mine who's a widower, and there was a depth of connection that you can have a conversation with someone because they get it. And people who have been divorced, they had a different experience of loss, right?
Right.
But when I had a very happy, loving marriage. And so that connection with a widow or a widower it's like we're part of a club and we get each other. And there's also that for the people who've lost a child, right? It's just, it's just a profound, it's a profoundness that only people who've been through it can understand.
What makes you smile today? We'll wrap this up here pretty soon, but what's a smile?
The simpler things, after almost losing my life and going through this tragedy, it's more the simple things. I'm much more into human connection. If I'm going to dinner with someone, I'm just as happy with pizza. It doesn't have to be a bougie place. It's just really being with the person, the human connection. I think that makes me smile more. I love to garden. I love my roses and my calla lilies and simple things like that. And that's a good place to be. It's a good place to be that it's the real stuff that it's not the hoity-toity, I need a new purse thing. A new purse isn't going to fill my soul. A new purse might feel nice for a day, but it's not going to fill my soul. So now I think it's the people and meaningful relationships that fill my soul.
I love this time that we've spent together. I know that we could talk for a couple hours more. Where Yellow Flowers Bloom, a true story of hope through unimaginable loss. It's Kim Cantin. And how can we get a hold of you or learn more about you?
Sure. So the book's on Amazon, so it's easy. Just go Amazon.com where Yellow Flowers Bloom. And then I have a website, kimcantin.com, and it's Cantin with an I-N, like a tin can. And that has all the media events and things that I've been engaged with. So
great.
You can go to that website.
We'll have it on our socials as well. Well, thank you for your time. You are.
Thank you.
I try to refrain from saying you are amazing because I know so many widows like, no, I'm not amazing. I'd like my husband back. But you are helping many people with your story.
Thank you so much. I hope I put purpose to it, right? Put purpose to it.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much, Pam.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you were inspired. Until the next episode, A Widow's Heart, always grateful for the support of Wings for Widows, part of the Wow God Podcast Network. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts and at wowgod.com.
Have you ever seen that happy couple and wonder how they have it so easy?
Or what life is really like behind their smiles?
Hi, we're Joe and Terry Buchanan from the Behind Our Smiles podcast.
We once thought a happy marriage would just come naturally.
Say a few vows and poof, happy marriage.
But unfortunately, real life isn't like that. All marriages struggle.
And after 25 years of marriage, we've had our share of struggles. But through it all, God has been faithful.
And we believe as we pursue connection with God and each other, our marriage can become all that God wants it to be.
We invite you to be part of the adventure. Join us each week as we share relatable, hope-filled stories and practical ways to strengthen your marriage.
You can download the Behind Our Smiles podcast wherever you listen to podcasts or at wowgod.com.